If you've played through WWE 2K22's MyGM mode, you'll know how important it is to gain fans. It's the entire purpose of the mode. Well, one of the main ways to increase the amount of fans that you gain from each show is to upgrade your advertising along with your show quality overall. Anyway, we received a comment from Ninja Angel Zero asking us to try a run where we weren't allowed to ever upgrade the show's logistics. But upon receiving this, we quickly agreed that it would be impossible. However, we have come up with our own version of the challenge which seems to be at least somewhat feasible. In our version you are allowed to upgrade the logistics, but only the ones that you unlock for free, meaning that we cannot purchase better stadiums, crew, special effects or advertising. I still think that this is going to be nigh on impossible to complete, but I wanted to give it my best go. So with that out of the way, let's get straight into the challenge. Alright, so let's hop into MyGM and give this challenge a go. Now for the first big decision, I was thinking of choosing Stephanie for the extra money in one of our shows, with the thinking behind that being that we're not going to get as much money from stadium attendance as we would in a regular run. But then I remembered we're actually going to be saving a ton of money on booking these stadiums and the lighting and the effects and all of that stuff, so I don't actually think Stephanie will be necessary. In fact, seeing that money isn't an issue, I think that Sonya and Adam Pearce are the two that I would probably recommend. But to be honest, I don't think it really matters who we choose out of these two, as I'm fairly certain this challenge is impossible anyway. But because I think we're going to have a bit more money than usual come week 10, I think Adam Pearce is actually probably the play here. Mainly so we can buy some new wrestlers before big pay-per-views and then put them in rivalries with other people and instigate them to be higher than they would have been. As I reckon there's going to be a lot of panic buys given the amount of stamina you need to get through a run these days. So I'm going to go ahead and choose Adam Pearce. Now for the brand, if any of them are going to help me get through this, it's going to be NXT's Fighting Champion card, but again, like I said at the start, I'm just not hopeful about this at all. And of course, seeing as I'm so pessimistic, I'm going to try and give myself the best chance by giving the opponent Shane and then NXT UK, with the difficulty on hard and the duration 15 weeks. Now for the draft, I'm going to try and spend as much of my budget as I can, obviously taking into account stamina as the main thing, but also making sure that I've just not got that much money left by the end of it, because if we're not booking special effects or crew, then we're going to be saving a lot along the way. So my first pick is going to be Asuka, as she has a ridiculous amount of stamina and she's going to carry my women's division throughout the run. Then the person that Asuka's going to be facing is Shayna Baszler. Now I would ideally like her to have more stamina, but I guess it'll do. Now I think this is the first time I've ever seen this, but in my draft I haven't got a John Cena, a Brock Lesnar, a Drew McIntyre, any of those guys. My best wrestler's actually Big E. But seeing as he has mid-80s stamina, I'm going to choose him anyway, and then I think I'll have to scroll down a bit to find him an opponent. So I did have to scroll down a fair bit, and the only option on this entire list is John Morrison. This is a very weird draft, but I'm going to go ahead and pick him up and just make do with what we've got. For my male tag team, I'm going to go with a Giant and Cruiser on either side, so Mace is going to be my first pickup for that. Then for the face Giant, I think there's only one option here, and it's Keith Lee. Now for the Cruisers in the tag team, Angel Garza has got the most stamina by far, so he is definitely going to be my first pick. Then the last member of the tag team rivalry is going to be Jimmy Uso, as he has decent stamina and also a good star power. He does cost a fair bit, but we are trying to stretch our budget, so that's not really much of an issue. Now onto the female tag team, and of course we've got the MyGM GOATs, Shotzi and Raquel Gonzalez. So I'm hoping that the other brand doesn't pick up Raquel when I choose Shotzi, but yeah, we're going to go for those two as our next picks. So as you can see, there's only one face Giant in the entirety of the female division, so we're going to go for Nia Jax, and then we've got a fair few choices for Cruisers, so we should be alright. Okay, perfect. So for the last member of the female tag team, we have Io Shirai, and I know I called her Io Shirai in the last video. Please stop sending me hate mail, it's getting very scary. Now for the last two superstars that we're going to be buying, we're going to go for Alexander Wolf and then one of the other face specialists, seeing as Alexander Wolf has such high stamina. So for the last pick, it's fairly obvious we're going to go for Oni Lorcan, as he has the highest stamina of the face specialists left on the list. Actually, it turns out we have enough budget for another wrestler, so Toni Storm is going to be welcomed, and then we'll probably have to sign a free agent for her to fight against. So that's how the draft's looking. We actually ended with $4,600, so we did exactly what we asked for. So for the champions, as per usual, we're going to go for the most popular superstars and obviously our main event stars. Now for the first show, of course, we're going to have all 4 titles on the line to get that popularity boost, and as you can see on screen, they're pretty self-explanatory. And seeing as we can't upgrade our logistics in week 1 anyway, we're just going to go ahead and get through this show. Match number 1 for the NXT title, and Big E comes out on top against John Morrison, but no rivalries formed, so it's a rubbish start. Nia and Io are the first women's tag team champions of the run, and again it's a 2.5 star, and again there's no rivalry formed. Jimmy Uso and Keith Lee are the male tag team title holders, and they actually did start a rivalry, so that's a lot better. Then in the main event we get a 3.5 star match, which is actually very good for this stage of a run. And Asuka retained her title, but unfortunately no rivalry again. I need all the help I can get in this challenge, and this game is not helping me in the slightest. So we've kicked things off after week 1, about 8,000 fans down, and to be honest that's going to be a trend going through this run I think. As you can see for week 2, we can now freely upgrade our arena to the concert hall, and obviously we are paying for that for this show, but we didn't pay to unlock it. So for this run that's absolutely fine, meaning that by week 5 we're going to have a decent stadium to be putting on the shows in. What isn't exactly fine is that for the crew and the advertisement, every single one past the one you get at the start is purchasable. So we're going to be sticking with local signs and flyer advertisements and the road crew for the entire run. Then for special effects we do get a free upgrade in the basic lights effects and pyro, so that again is going to be the only one we can upgrade to during the run. Anyway, for week 2's show, we've got Big E versus John Morrison in the main event for the title, and then Asuka versus Shayna in the opener. Then the midcard sees Alexander Wolf and Onnie Lorcan give the male tag teams a rest, whilst the female tag team title is on the line in the second midcard match. Then I'm starting them early. I've put 3 charity promos into the show in a desperate plea to get some fans early on. So let's advance, and hopefully we don't end up too many fans behind Shane. A much better start to the show as Asuka beats Baszler for the title again, but it actually starts a rivalry this time. That one's a 3 star, so not quite as high rating as the last show, but will absolutely take the new rivalry over half a star. Alexander Wolf beats Onnie Lorcan in a tables match, and it's only a 2 star, but that does grow the rivalry, so that one's going alright. The second midcard match finally starts the rivalry, and Raquel and Shotzi actually win the titles off of Io and Nia. So the MyGM GOATs are rightly the women's tag team champions. Then the main event smashes out of the park with a 3.5 star rating as Big E retains his title again against John Morrison. So with the help of the charity promos, we actually gained about 6,000 fans on Shane, so we're only 3,000 behind now. So my thinking is we're going to use those every single week to just hopefully try and get close to him. So week 3's rolled around and we have unlocked the Capitol Wrestling Center, so of course we're going to immediately put that on. Okay, so I've just come down to try and find an opponent for Toni Storm this week, and I've actually found the best wrestler in the world in the free agent slot. So of course it would be extremely rude not to do this. Welcome to NXT Kyle Slickman. And of course we're getting him immediately involved in a charity promo as he doesn't currently have anyone to fight, but believe you me, he will be fighting soon. The rest of the show obviously doesn't matter now that Kyle's making a grand entrance, but Big E is fighting John Morrison again for the title as he requested a rematch. Then in the main event we've got Jimmy Uso and Keith Lee versus Angel Garza and Mace for the titles. But one thing I noticed about this is that Keith Lee and Jimmy Uso don't actually hold the titles, which is strange seeing as they won them in week 1, so I don't know what's going on there, but we're just going to go with it and hopefully someone gets the title today. Then the midcard we've signed Vicky to fight against Toni Storm as she doesn't have an opponent, and that is very much going to be a half star if not 1 star match. Then the last midcard is Onnie Lorcan versus Alexander Wolf, and that is the entire show. So let's get into it and hope that these matches are okay. So incredibly, John Morrison's won the title back and it's actually a 4 star rating. Annoyingly, there's no rivalry increase, but to be honest, I have Adam Pearce, so I could always use that before the first pay-per-view, but ideally I wouldn't do that as I'd rather use it before week 10 or maybe WrestleMania. So the first midcard match actually gets a 1.5 star rating, which is much better than I thought it would do, and Vicky actually goes over. So hopefully her popularity will increase and that can actually be a decent rivalry in the future. But of course, in this run, as per, there's been no rivalry formed, so we're just going to have to hope that that does something in the next couple of weeks. Kyle's first charity promo is only okay, but I can't even imagine the sound of the pop that he got for this entrance. The Capitol Wrestling Center has never seen anything close to it. The second midcard is almost as disappointing as the first, as it only gets a 2 star rating and the rivalry again does not progress. The main event has Jimmy and Keith finally win the title, or maybe not, I don't actually know whether they've won it or not. But either way, it's a 3 star match, and again, there's no rivalry formed. I don't know whether since the patch where they introduced 4 matches and the tag team titles they've made it harder, but I've noticed that rivalries progress so much less frequently now. So in that show, we only lost 1,000 fans on Shane, which means we're actually only 3k behind him. Who knows, maybe after WrestleMania Backlash we might actually get ahead. So for week 4, we've got 3 of the 4 titles on the line, with Asuka versus Shayna in the main event and then the women's tag team in the opener. The midcard has Alexander Wolf versus Onnie to try and push them to a level 3 rivalry, and then the second midcard is the male tag team titles. So I think that's a pretty good show, but to be honest, I'm still not holding my breath at all, as Shane will probably gain about 10,000 fans on me. So the show kicks off with a pretty good match as Io and Nia get their titles back in a 3.5 star rated fight, but again, as you can see, it doesn't progress the rivalry. The first mid-card fight finally progresses a rivalry as Wolf and Lorcan go to level 3. And that's a 2.5 star rating as well, so we cannot complain in the slightest. Then the second mid-card fight is a 3 star rating and does progress the rivalry as well. Jimmy Uso and Keith Lee retain, and that's a pretty decent show so far. And we've ended even stronger as Baszler picks up the title in the main event, 4 star rating, level 3 rivalry, let's go. We've had another week of losing 1,000 fans on Shane, but as we go into WrestleMania Backlash, I think we actually have a pretty decent chance of overtaking him. So for WrestleMania Backlash, we have the last upgrade that we're able to make for our logistics, which is of course the WrestleMania Backlash Stadium. So from here on out, it doesn't get any better than this. So that's how the show's looking for Backlash. We have all 4 titles on the line as you'd expect, and 3 charity promos to try and boost the fans. I honestly think this looks like a pretty good show, and I'm fairly tempted to use my Fighting Champion power card, but to be honest, I always usually keep that for week 10. So I think I'm going to stick to that plan and go ahead and simulate this show, and hopefully we can get ahead of Shane without it. We've kicked off the pay-per-view with a pretty decent match as John Morrison retains his title in a 4.5 star classic. The first mid-card match actually gets a 3 star rating, and that rivalry is complete, so it didn't end up doing too bad. Then the middle mid-card fight gets a 4 star rating and Io and Nia go over again. That actually bumps the rivalry to a level 2, which could be quite useful going into week 10. The final mid-card fight has Jimmy and Keith retain their titles yet again in a 4 star rated match. And that rivalry is now level 3, so we can actually use them in the next 5 weeks. Then we've ended off the show with an absolute banger as we get a 5 star rating in the Hell in a Cell match between Asuka and Baszler. Baszler retains the title and she doesn't get injured, so that's a great end to the show. And as you can see, after the first pay-per-view, we're actually ahead of Shane. Now I don't think this will last very long, as when he upgrades his logistics, he's going to start getting loads more fans. So I think it's only a matter of time before he gradually overtakes me again, but we're going to enjoy this moment while we can. So going into week 6, we've got 2 titles on the line this time, with both tag team titles in the opener and main event. Kyle's making his first ever appearance on the show as he goes off against Onnie Lorcan, and of course we're going to have a GM interference. Then the second mid-card match is going to have to be Asuka versus Vicky McLeod as we have some serious stamina issues. But as you can see in the top right, we're actually gaining a fair amount of money now, so we should be able to buy in some wrestlers as and when we need to. Then the final thing, we've got Toni Storm calling out Shayna Baszler as I'm going to start a rivalry between those two. So let's get into it and hope that we can build on the lead that we have on Shane. The women's tag team match as the opener gets a 3.5 star rating and the rivalry doesn't progress. But actually at this stage I think that's quite good as we need them to be in a rivalry ready for week 10 and we can't have them reaching level 4 too soon. So yeah, that's actually not a bad start to the show, and Shotzi and Raquel both didn't get injured either. Somehow even with us running in to help him, Kyle still lost against Lorcan. At least it was a 2 star match, which is actually pretty good, so we can deal with it. The second mid-card fight gets a 2 star rating as Asuka beats McLeod, and that's pretty much expected. Then in the main event we have a 3.5 star rated tag team match as Jimmy and Keith retain again. And that rivalry is now level 4, which is kind of complicated as we can't use those wrestlers now, but at least it's set up ready for week 10. So after week 6, Shane actually gained 1,000 fans on us, but we're still fairly comfortably ahead, so let's just keep trying to build on it. So that's how week 7 looks going into it. We've got Big E versus John Morrison as the opener for the title. Then we've got Io and Nia versus Shotzi and Raquel for the title in the main event, with the mid-cards being exactly the same as last week with Onnie versus Kyle and then Asuka versus Vicky. And seeing as it didn't start a rivalry last week, I'm going to have a call out between Toni and Shayna again in hopes that it does this week. So let's progress and see what the damage is. So the opening fight gets a 4 star rating and that rivalry is now level 4, which is perfect going into TLC. Lorcan beats Slickman again, but it's another 2 star match, so that's actually going pretty well. And it's gone to a level 2 rivalry, so hopefully at TLC they'll put on a pretty good match. The second mid-card match actually gets a 3 star rating, which is great, as Asuka beats McLeod yet again. And as I feared, Raquel has actually picked up an injury in the main event, but it's a 3.5 star match and the rivalry's up to level 3, so not the end of the world. And after that show, we actually gained 12,000 fans on Shane, so not only do we have loads more money than he does, we're actually in a pretty good spot fan-wise as well. So for week 8, we've brought in Fandango to fight Alexander Wolf in one of the mid-card slots, with Onnie and Kyle continuing their rivalry in the first one. Then for the opener, we've got Toni versus Baszler for the title, and then the main event is the male tag team titles. So this show's probably going to go pretty badly, but we're just going to have to try and deal with it as we move towards week 10. Shayna retains her title in the opening match and it only gets a 2.5 star rating, so not good at all, and no rivalry progressed, which is brilliant. Unfortunately, in the first mid-card match, Oney Lorcan hands Kyle another L as he goes over in a 2-star rated match. Fandango wins on his debut in NXT, but only gets a 2-star rated match. But anyway, that rivalry's level 1, so at least we've got something to work on in the future. And then for the main event, the Jimmy Uso and Keith Lee Reign of Terror continues. Another 4-star amazing rated match, and that rivalry hasn't even progressed to level 3 or 4 yet. So hopefully that'll still be a great match in week 10. So after gaining 12,000 fans on Shane last week, we've now lost 11,000 this week. I knew this was going to happen, but hopefully we can delay it until TLC to try and actually push ourselves that little bit further ahead of him, as we still have our Fighting Champion power card in the bank. So for week 9, I'll quickly show you that we still haven't upgraded any of our logistics, just to make sure that you know that I'm not cheating in any way. Not really sure why I'd do that, but there it is for you all to see. So for week 9, we have Shayna versus Tony in the main event for the title, and that's going to be a tables match, and then the opener is the women's tag team match, but that one's just going to be normal. Then the mid-card's going to be the exact same as it has been for the last few weeks, and the fans are probably going to get pretty bored, but hopefully that's not how this game works, and this is all okay. Now I did use a pre-match physio on Raquel Gonzalez, but unfortunately I didn't have one for Shotzi, so I was a bit worried that she'd get injured in this fight. But thankfully that's not the case, and they get a 3.5-star rated match, and the rivalry's level 4, so I couldn't really have asked for much more. Unfortunately, we're still waiting on Kyle to get his first win, as Oney beats him again in the first mid-card match. Vicky McLeod actually does beat Asuka in the second mid-card match though, and gets a 3-star rating as well. Then in the main event, the rivalry has stayed at level 1 between Tony and Baszler, but Tony actually wins the title. Only a 3-star match though, and that's a very disappointing end to the show. So as I predicted, Shane is now 1,000 fans ahead of us after picking up about 17,000 on us this week. So I'm pretty sure it's all downhill from here, but I do have the Fighting Champion power card to use at TLC now. So not all hope is lost, but I'm pretty sure this run is fairly impossible from this point forward. So week 10's rolled around, and of course for the TLC pay-per-view I've got all 4 titles on the line. I've used my Fighting Champion power card as well, so hopefully this show will be a bit of a banger. Anyway, we've got the women's title in a Hell in a Cell as the opener, and the men's title in a Hell in a Cell as well as the main event. Then for the mid-card, we've got Asuka versus Vicky in an Extreme Rules match, the male tag team titles on the line in a TLC match, and then the female tag team titles on the line in an Extreme Rules match. And of course, as per, we've got 4 charity promos as well to try and pad out our fans this week. So hopefully this is enough to overtake Shane again, but honestly, even if I do, he's probably just going to come back in week 12 or week 13. So we open the show with a legendary match, but unfortunately Shayna Baszler does get injured. Toni Storm actually retains her title though, which is very impressive. Then the first mid-card match actually sees a 4-star rating between Asuka and McLeod. Now seeing as that's not a title match, that's a very good rating. Then the first of the 2 tag team matches gets a 4.5-star classic rating. So this show's going very well so far, but obviously we have used the Fighting Champion power card, so that's why. Then the second tag team title match actually gets a legendary rating as well. And miraculously, neither Shotzi nor Raquel Gonzalez get injured. So that's actually a perfect end to their rivalry. Then to end out the show, we have our third 5-star rated match. Once again, this is proving that Fighting Champion is so overpowered in this game mode. But seeing as we're doing a nigh on impossible challenge, we'll absolutely take it. Okay, so just before I progress, I just want to show you guys that this is an entire show of singles matches. This is what Shane's put on for the TLC pay-per-view, and I guarantee you that they all get decent ratings. So as you can see, obviously I've smashed Shane in the ratings, but still he gets 3 or 3.5-star matches by putting on regular normal 1v1s. So I'm not really sure what's going on with that, but we'll just have to hope that we're ahead of him by a fair amount of fans again. So even though Shane put on an entire show of singles matches, we actually only gained 7,000 fans over him. That's pretty disappointing and kind of shows us exactly how the rest of the run's going to go. And obviously this is going to be because he has better advertising logistics than us, and that's just going to snowball for the last 5 weeks. So we'll enjoy being first one last time before Shane brutally overtakes us. Week 11 has the 2 tag team titles as the opener and the main event, and then the mid-card is actually a new rivalry between Vicky McLeod and Lana. Then the final mid-card has Oney versus Kyle again to try and get Kyle his first win, and then obviously 3 charity promos. So at this point I'm pretty sure that Jimmy Uso and Keith Lee are incapable of losing their titles. They've retained them yet again in a 3-star match, but unfortunately no rivalry's been started again. Vicky McLeod is making quite the name for herself at NXT as she beats Lana in a tables match in the first mid-card fight. Unfortunately no rivalry was started, but for a first match between these two, 2.5 star is not too bad at all. In the second mid-card fight, Oni beats Kyle again, but it's a 2.5-star match and the rivalry's level 3. For the main event, I kind of knew an injury was coming due to the lack of stamina on all of the superstars, but Shotzi and Tamina actually win the titles off of Shirai and Jax. A 3-star rating for that fight, so not the greatest, and I imagine Shane is going to be a fair amount of fans ahead of us again. So rather incredibly, we actually gained 9,000 fans on Shane this week, meaning that we're now sat 17,000 ahead overall. I doubt this is going to continue, but if it does, we've pulled off a pretty miraculous feat. So week 12 is looking pretty terrible. We've had to make 2 new pretty big signings in Randy Orton and Roman Reigns, but they haven't helped too much as we can't put on any tag team matches at all. So unfortunately, this is how the show is going to have to look going into week 12, and we've just got to hope that Shane doesn't overtake us by too much. So the opening match sees Oni beat Kyle again, but it is a 3-star fight, so that's not too bad at all. The first mid-card fight is pretty disappointing as Wolf beats Fandango and it only gets a 2-star rating. For the second mid-card fight though, it actually goes pretty well as Vicky wins again over Lana and their rivalry does go to level 1. Then the main event has Randy Orton win the title off of Big E, but unfortunately Big E gets injured. Of course that starts a rivalry as well, but I might actually put Roman versus Randy for the title. So that show actually saw us lose about 34 fans and Shane gained 23,000. So we're now down about 6,000 fans, and as predicted, that's probably the end of the run. So week 13 is actually looking a little bit better as we can now put the male tag teams on the line in the opening match and the male title on the line in the main event. The mid-card's still looking pretty poor though, with Wolf versus Fandango and Lana versus Vicky. But I actually managed to use a special promotion power card, so hopefully this show doesn't go too badly at all. The opening match gets a 3.5-star rating, and finally Jimmy Uso and Keith Lee get into a rivalry with Zayn and Mace. The first of the 2 mid-cards gets a 2.5-star rating, but actually gets them up to a level 4 rivalry, so at least that gives us some options when we go to WrestleMania. Then the second mid-card match actually gets a 3-star rating, so not too bad whatsoever. Then finally the main event gets a 4-star amazing rating and actually starts a rivalry between Orton and Reigns. So to be honest, I couldn't really have asked for a much better show than that. And it seems like the special promotion power card did absolute wonders for our show, as we managed to gain about 40,000 fans on Shane and we've got a pretty comfortable lead now. Again, I'm very skeptical about this lasting, but hopefully it does and we can see it out through WrestleMania. So just before we go into week 14, I want to show you again that we're only using the logistics that you get given for free. Of course, as I said before, you still have to pay for these every single week, but you don't have to buy them to unlock them. So that's how we're looking heading into week 14. I've actually put an incredibly stacked card on. Now the reason I'm doing this is if the superstar has over 40 stamina, then it doesn't really matter how much stamina they lose this week, as even if they go down below 40, they're not going to get injured in this show. And then of course it's WrestleMania next week, so it doesn't really matter if they get injured there. But anyway, we've got the women's title on the line in the opener in a TLC match, and then the exact same match for the male title in the main event. Then for the first mid-card fight, I've had to buy in Maya T. Kirk to fight Asuka because I don't have anyone else. Then finally for the second mid-card, I'm taking a small risk in fighting Shotzi in the women's tag team title match. So if she gets injured, that's going to be devastating, but that's why I've put it in a tables match, so we're just going to have to go with it and hope for the best. So it's all going to plan so far as the opening match gets a 4.5-star rating. Shayna Baszler and Toni Storm go to a level 4 rivalry, which is perfect just before WrestleMania. Rather incredibly, Maya T. Kirk actually beats Asuka in an Extreme Rules match, and it's only a 2-star rating, but that's fine as it was just a filler match. Unfortunately, we've had an absolute shocker, and Shotzi has got injured in the women's tag team match. So now I've just got to pray that there's an injury rehab card on the market for me to buy. But anyway, that gets a 3-star rating, and the rivalry is now level 2. Then for the main event, Orton vs Reigns gets another 4-star rating in the TLC match. And Orton retains his title, so going into WrestleMania, that looks like a pretty good fight. So after that show, Shane gained about 14,000 fans on us, which means that he's probably going to overtake us after WrestleMania. But I just want to say that whatever happens in this final show, I feel like I've done pretty well in this run anyway. And yep, that confirms it, Shane has absolutely ruined my show by taking Randy Orton out of the picture. Unfortunately, that's pretty much the end of the run now, as that was the main event match for the show. We are in luck though, as in the power card section we do have an injury rehab 3 card, so we can go ahead and heal Shotzi ready for this week. So one last time, I'm going to show you that I haven't upgraded my logistics past the point where I said I could. And as for the WrestleMania show, we're going to have to deal without Randy. But for the main event, we've got a Hell in a Cell match for the women's title between Toni and Shayna. Then the opener is the women's tag team title match in another Hell in a Cell. Then for the mid-cards, we've got Kyle versus Oni in an Extreme Rules match, followed by Fandango versus Wolf in a TLC match. And then we round off the mid-card with another TLC match for the male tag team titles. So as I've said all along, I'm not actually sure if this challenge is possible, but I feel like I've given it a very good go, and let's just get into WrestleMania and see how we do. So the opening match has Shotzi and Tamina win the titles in a 4.5 star classic. Not a bad start to the show, so hopefully it can only get better from here. And of course, Big Match Kyle has won on the grandest stage of them all. He lost every single one of the matches that had no purpose, and as soon as it comes to the big time, he comes out on top. That's classic Kyle and a great way to end out the run. The second mid-card match gets a 4-star rating, which is not great, but obviously it's just the best that we can do. Ideally, that would have been the first mid-card match and gotten a 4-star rating, and then Randy versus Roman would have been in the main event, but we're just going to have to deal with it. And I think that puts the final nail in the coffin, as we only get a 3.5 star match rating for the third mid-card fight. That's really disappointing, and I'm pretty sure that we've definitely lost at this point, but let's sim the last match and see how it goes. So the main event gets a 4.5 star rating, which is actually pretty good, so let's go ahead and advance and see exactly how much Shane has beaten us by. So as I predicted for the entire run, Shane actually has overtaken us right at the end. Also, I know that Randy Orton is vetoed, but it doesn't mean that he just evaporated from existence. Anyway, we only lost by 18,000 fans in the end, so I think that's a pretty respectable attempt. If you enjoyed watching this and want me to do some more MyGM challenges, please do leave a like on the video. And as always, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. Thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next time.